So this company went out, they were contracted to go out empty dumpsters. Like, it's like a dumpster, like who would care about that? But like they would get like things like the weight, all the volumes of how much trash they picked up at all these different places.
Yeah.
So like if you have all these chain restaurants that are publicly traded, you're thinking like maybe even just competitors of theirs. By the volume of trash they're picking up from these places every 3 days or whatever it is, you start to see like, is their business going well or is their business not doing well? Like the volumes of trash they were collecting was up here and now it's down here.
Literally one man's trash, another man's treasure in this case, right?
And that's a wild example, but it just goes to show you that you never know.
This is James Coyle, a consultant who helps companies monetize their data. And that dumpster company was not in the trash business, not really. It was in the information business, turning the weight of a restaurant's garbage into a signal you could trade on. One man's trash, somebody else's edge. And here's the thing, that's not a weird outlier. It's the whole game. There's an enormous humming economy built on the data you throw off just by living, where you shop, what you buy, the route your phone takes home. You generate all of it, all of this data, and you cannot really see any of it, and you have almost no idea what it's worth. Today, we crack open this black box. That is what we're exploring on today's episode of The People's AI, presented by the Vana Foundation. 4 questions for this episode. How do data markets actually work? Like, what are they? Who's buying and who's selling? How is AI changing all of this? And what say do you have? You, the person who generates all of this data in the first place. I'm Jeff Wilser, a longtime journalist and a host of the AI Summit at Consensus. And I'm proud to partner with Vana to bring you this episode. Vana is supporting the creation of a new internet, one rooted in data sovereignty, user ownership, and data portability. Their mission is to create a decentralized data ecosystem where individuals, not corporations, govern their own data and share the value it creates. Learn more at vana.org. So let's start at the beginning, where all of it started. What's the origin of these data markets anyway? For that, I went to a man who I knew would give us a solid answer.
Yeah, well, you're asking the right guy, because before I got into fintech, I was briefly a social studies teacher. So I am very interested in the historical roots of these systems.
This is Alex Johnson. He writes a newsletter called Fintech Takes. And he's one of the sharpest readers of how money and data actually move through this country, which, lucky for us, he explains like a social studies teacher he used to be. And Alex starts the story where it really starts, not with AI, not even close to AI, not with the internet, with the original data market, the one that's been running for over a century, and that you're already enrolled in whether you like it or not, the credit bureau.
The credit bureaus, they have a very interesting history because they actually grew out of merchant or retail lending, right? So go back in time 100, 150 years ago, it wasn't banks that were doing most of the lending to consumers. It was the stores that you shopped with. You would have a line of credit at each one of the stores. The general store would know Alex Johnson. They would know roughly how much money I was good for. And because they lived in the same community that I lived in and they knew the same people I knew, they had a roughly good idea of who I was and if I was good for the money that they wanted to loan me in order to buy the stuff that I needed to buy. What ended up happening over time was that as cities got bigger and as people started to move around a little bit more, we needed to have some way of keeping track of who was good for what that went beyond just the knowledge of the person running the store, right? And so you go back in time 100, 120 years ago, every town had their own credit bureau. Every city had their own credit bureau, or sometimes multiple credit bureaus, depending on how big the city was, right? New York had a number of different credit bureaus that operated in different parts of the city. And essentially what they did was they were just a way for individual merchants or retailers to share information with each other so that I couldn't go to one general store, buy something on credit, rip them off, not pay them back, and then go to a different one on.
And what happened next to any student of economic history should be quite predictable.
So they wanted to share information with each other. Well, as happens in a lot of markets, and I think in particular in data, over time, it became really consolidated, right? And so you went from having 10,000 credit bureaus to 8,000 to 5,000 to 1,000 to 100 to 3. And today we have 3, right? And so it just collapsed and consolidated down. Equifax is the oldest modern credit bureau that we have that was around the longest. They have more than 100-year history dating back to being one of these small credit unions that was operating in the southeastern United States. And it, again, if you study the history of the credit bureaus, the process would seem wild if you describe it in a modern context, right? They would have investigators who would go out into the communities that they were covering, and they would basically go to your office and interview your boss. They would go to all your neighbors and ask you how good a neighbor you are. Is this person trustworthy? And whatever they were told would make its way into a paper credit file that would sit at Equifax or any of the other credit bureaus. And then when a lender needed to know something about you, literally what they would do is, oh, you want to buy this on credit? Okay. They would send someone to the back office. They would call on the phone. The person at the credit bureau who answered the phone would send someone to run to get your paper file. They would open up that file, and then they would just read whatever was in that file to the person over the phone. And then they would make a decision on whether they wanted to give you credit. And there are stories about the things that were in those files were like, your neighbor who hates you for a reason that has nothing to do with your trustworthiness would just be like, oh yeah, Alex, he's crazy. And verbatim, it would just say, neighbor says he's crazy in credit report. And that was just in there, right? There was no verification. There was no nothing. And so that was the origins of the credit bureaus.
So this was the analog version with slide rules and graph paper. Next up, of course, enter technology, enter the computer.
And what happened that kind of created the modern data infrastructure that we have today was obviously computers. And so computers, when it became clear that computer systems were going to be used to track Americans' financial data, because the credit bureaus in the 1970s were just starting to come online and turn their paper files into electronic files. Essentially what happened is Congress in the 70s got wind of that happening and they flipped out. And they were like, we can't have computer files on consumers that consumers can't see and can't interact with. And so they passed a whole bunch of legislation in the 70s. One of the landmark pieces of legislation was the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, which was the first national data privacy law, I think, in any country, right? So we were very, very early to creating this very focused national privacy law, data privacy law, specifically to govern the use of credit data, because they were focused on the credit bureaus. And among the many things that did was it required that, okay, if you're going to build a file on me, Alex Johnston, and talk to my neighbors or talk to lenders I've worked with or talk to my boss or whatever, you at least have to give me visibility into that file. So I have a legal right to be able to get a copy of that file, to review it, and to dispute any inaccuracies and to make you fix or investigate those inaccuracies. And so it created a little bit more of an accountability. It created rules around how the data could be used. And that was really the origins of the modern system that we have. And it was around the 1970s when we really saw that trend of consolidation happen. And so we went from having a bunch of bureaus that operated in a very unregulated fashion to only having a handful of credit bureaus, the ones we have today, that are highly regulated and that maintain these massive data sets inside computers on what everyone does as it relates to credit and finance.
So the credit bureau is the one room in this data market house where there clearly are rules. You have the right to see your file, the right to dispute it, to know it's even there. But this, in some ways, is the exception. When you step outside credit into the rest of the data economy, it's murkier and almost none of those rules follow you. There's not really a file to pull, no law that says you get to look. So what about all of that? Everything that's not in your credit report. For that, let's go back to James Coyle, our guy from the dumpster. Now, James came to the data trade from, of all places, medical devices. His theory was that if he could learn human anatomy, he could certainly learn data. He has spent years, over a decade, inside the marketplaces where companies realize the exhaust of their business is worth something.
It goes back to the beginning for me when I started working with Venture Development Center, which is a misleading name because it sounds like we're a VC company or something like that. That's not what we were. I think there was ambitions of that, but really what we became is the first, think of it as like a marketplace for data aggregators who were amassing all this data as a byproduct of their core business. I try to see, like, is there maybe a market for this? Can we monetize this data? Data can come from anywhere.
Who's typically buying this stuff? Kind of paint the cast of characters. Are they companies that we would have, the average person would have heard of? Tell me about who's buying this stuff.
So it really does depend on the type of data, obviously. So like if you have like a data set that, let's just take like geolocation data for an easy example that people are familiar with it, like one way or the other. You've heard of like geolocation data, but maybe you haven't purchased it or needed it directly, but it just gives you an understanding like how many people are actually visiting a particular location. That's the general use case. So you have this like anonymous user and you say like, here's the different places that they visit on a daily basis, weekly basis. All these things become more valuable over time. So you have an app on your device that with an SDK, it's like a software kit that allows location to be tracked. And when you download something, you say, hey, will you allow this thing to track location? And you said yes or no, or so that's how it works. And so you start to see like how many people are going to this Target store in Paramus, New Jersey versus how many people are going to this Walmart in Pompton Lakes, New Jersey. Like you see that in huge volumes all over the country. And so I get a real understanding of like, is visitation going up or going down? Because as much as we think about things as being online, the bulk of shopping still occurs in a store. So it's still by far the most important indicator of how a business is doing. So the obvious use cases for those were for like hedge funds to try to understand like what retail locations or companies overall are doing well, and how much visitation are they getting, restaurants like quick serve restaurants and all the different companies like that. But from a competitive intelligence side of things, like, so if you're Target, you want to understand how visitation is going to your closest competitors. So you want to know like how many people are going to Walmart, how many people are going to Sam's Club, or how many people are going to Costco. They do carry a lot of the same things. So it's a way for them to understand, like, are we getting our share? Are we losing share? Where's it going? Because then it's like, how do we pivot? What can we do to try to get those people back? It's also another way to say like, hey, I'm spending all this money on advertising. We're spending millions and millions of dollars on these television campaigns, and we're putting them in all these individual markets. Are we seeing more visitors? Are we seeing this actually pay off, or is it just falling flat?
So that's the machine. In some ways, old, enormous, mostly invisible, and every bit of it runs on us, which leads to the question you've probably been waiting to ask. If your data is the fuel for all of this, what's it actually worth, like to you, in dollars? James does the math, and it might surprise you. It kind of surprised me.
Let's just say you're a hedge fund that wants to understand, like, I have 1 million people that will share their credit card history. They're scattered all over the world. You're not going to know who they are. Like, that'll all be stripped out. But every single one of those people wants $10 to share that with you every month. Like, you're not going to spend that. It's just like the value isn't going to be there because it's way too expensive. So it's trying to find the middle ground there where like users can realistically, if you can make $5 here, $10 here, $1 here, like, yeah, it doesn't sound massive, but right now you're making $0 and somebody else is making millions.
Weird irony in this too, where it's like, in some extent, the data that these companies need to effectively market and target and do all the things, even create products, to some extent, that's almost priceless, the very high price they're willing to pay.
Yeah.
But on a per user basis, even if this data is like super valuable, it's it's not very impressive on a per person basis, right? We're talking like a few bucks here and there, which is, I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around that. That it's like data is fueling this economy, right? And this information economy and this AI landscape. Data is fueling it, right?
Yeah.
But then again, somehow the average listener's value for data is like, all right, here's $3. So
that is like the tough spot of it from the individual user, because in aggregate, from millions of users, it's worth all this money.
Yeah.
But then, when you divide that by individual contributor, all of a sudden it's like, well, that's not that much. But like, you have to, that's the thing. You can't be like thinking like, well, I'm going to just retire and become a millionaire off my own data. It's not going to work that way,
So that's the perspective from an individual perspective, from your data. A few bucks, you're not retiring on it. But I wanted the actual number, like from the industry perspective. So back to Alex Johnson.
I looked up some data before I came on. If you were to go just to like look for raw individual data in the data broker market, it is truly fractions of a cent, right? So it's like the most expensive things you could find would be like shopping transaction data, which is like pretty useful, right? Like what is Alex shopping for? Like that's pretty useful data. And that is like 1/100th of a penny or something per record, right? So like it's just very, very, very small on an individual basis. But like they don't want to know about just one thing I bought. They want to know about a bunch of stuff that I bought. And they don't just want to know about Alex. They want to know about me and my 300 million closest friends, right? So when you start to add up the numbers, it gets really big. And what the data I've seen suggests that the data brokerage market overall is like a $150 to $200 billion a year industry. So when you start to magnify this out at scale, it gets very big. Now, again, that's big, but that's not like trillions of dollars. And so I do want to say that sometimes I think, and this is another thing I would tell people about like the credit bureaus, if they didn't know, is like, it's tempting on the outside to think, oh my gosh, like these companies are just our data has so much value, and they're just like making a ton of money with zero cost and like just living like kings on this data. The data broker industry is actually a tough industry to work in, right? That's why it operates at scale, is because you do have to invest a lot of money in all the places to hoover up this data. You do have to do at least some work to make sure the data is somewhat accurate, or people won't buy it from you. And you have to deal with a lot of, even though it is in this regulatory gray zone, you do have to deal with like the Attorney General of California calling you up and asking you questions about it. And so it's not the industry to be in, but it is a big industry overall.
Really, the heart of much of my questions is that there's this gut sense, I think a lot of listeners have, that my data is being bought and sold, and it kind of feels creepy, right? They're not doing anything. They're not trying to raise their hand saying, here's my data. It's just happening. So in financial data specifically, kind of or any data of your choice, what would you say is like super genuinely mundane and legit? Like, okay, this is very solid ground, but what should alarm folks? What behavior should make them say, this is not okay?
I'll give you some really tangible examples, and you, Jeff, can tell me if you think they're okay or not, right? So I'll describe a couple. One is just your normal credit bureau example. And so I am working with 5 different lenders. And as a requirement for working with those lenders, they will, the word is furnish. They will furnish that data to the credit bureaus, which is a fancy way of saying give that data to the credit bureaus. And they will give that data to the credit bureaus. The credit bureaus will package it, add it to my credit file as a record of how I'm doing, paying my money back or not to those different lenders. And then they will sell that data to other lenders when I ask a new lender for credit. So if I go apply for a car loan tomorrow, that lender who I apply for the car loan for is going to call up Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. And I say call, they're not going to call on the phone like they used to, but they will hit those databases and they will pull my file and they will make a determination as to whether I'm a good credit risk or a bad credit risk by paying back the loans that I've had over time. Jeff, is that legitimate or not? Does that seem fair to you?
It feels fair. Am I crazy?
No, I think it's fair. I think it seems very fair. Like, and the way to put a bullet on that would be to say, imagine a world in which that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Would lenders lend anyone any money if they didn't know anything about them? No, right? So if we want cost-effective credit, which I think we all want, we have to agree to some form of a system where the data gets shared, even if it's data being shared without my explicit knowledge or consent, and even if sometimes it results in a bad outcome for me individually. As a society, we probably want that to exist. All right, second example, everything I just described about the credit bureaus, except this time, instead of me going and applying for a car loan or a credit card, I get an offer in the mail that says I've been pre-approved for a car loan or a credit card. I didn't ask for this. I didn't give out my address. I didn't do anything. This company I don't know, who I've never talked to and never raised my hand and asked for anything, sent me a piece of paper in the mail that said, I am pre-approved. Well, how do you know I'm pre-approved? Well, we looked at your credit report. Well, I didn't give you permission to look at my credit report, but you did anyway. This is legally allowed under the Fair Credit Reporting Act that I mentioned before. Fair or unfair?
It feels a lot more invasive and a lot less consent.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree. So that one is an interesting edge case. It is technically allowed under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, but it doesn't feel quite as good, right?
Yep.
All right, here's a third example. And this is very new. This is something that I don't think people are necessarily aware of. Fairly soon, if not right now, you could go into your Chase mobile banking app and you're a Chase Sapphire Preferred credit card customer, which really means that like JP Morgan Chase knows a ton about how you shop using the Chase Sapphire Preferred card. They know everything. They know everywhere you use your card, they have insight into that. Fairly soon, if not already, you will go into your Chase mobile app and you will see ads inside your logged in version of the Chase mobile app going, hey, Alex, we see that you like this type of product. You'd be interested in this. And an advertiser is advertising to me inside of Chase, inside of their mobile app, based on their knowledge about me specifically. That, ironically enough, is actually something that doesn't have to be regulated at all because it's Chase's data and they are selling it directly to advertisers. So rather than going through a data broker or some third party in the middle, Chase is selling that data directly to advertisers so they can advertise inside Chase's mobile app to all of its customers. Fair, unfair?
It actually doesn't feel as bad as the second example because I've already given Chase all of my data. Although I guess
you know that they know this about you.
Right. Now, however, I don't think the advertiser should know this about me, right? So I think like that's what's the bridge too far for me is the idea that where I spend the money is getting that they have access to my internal banking stuff.
Exactly. And I think the other interesting question with a lot of this stuff, honestly, is who gets the right to monetize this data, right?
Yeah.
Like who should get paid for this? And it runs smack into another thing that I know we're going to talk about, which is like open banking. But there's this real interesting debate happening right now around, okay, if it's my data, Alex Johnson's data, and I'm the one who generates it, it's about me, shouldn't I have the legal right to decide who gets to access my data?
Yep.
And if certain companies want to access my data, is it crazy that I should get paid for that data? Like, why don't I get a check for this?
And that raises another question, and in some ways the center of the whole thing. We've been asking what your data is worth, but underneath this is a harder question. The one this episode has been circling, not what's your data worth, but whose data is it? You generated every transaction, every location ping, every late night impulse purchase. It's yours the way your shadow is yours. So why does the answer get so complicated? I asked Alex this question straight. In your view, or in your view of the law, who's right? Whose data is it? I've asked this question a bunch on this podcast, and I've asked this question 20 times, and I'm still confused. I've heard different things from lawyers, right? So who owns the data? Who owns your data?
What's it's the question to ask. It is the question our whole conversation revolves around. And I think there's two answers. I'm sorry to say, but legally speaking, at least according to the law today, it's not our data. It's the company's data. It's not our data. It's not our data. We don't own it. There's no contract I can show you that says like Alex Johnson owns his data. So legally, we don't own our data. The companies that we interact with own our data, and they can do whatever they want with the data within the bounds of the contract and the law that already exists. There's a different answer though. There's a second answer. And the second answer is, okay, intuitively, what do we all think is fair? Societally, what do we think the fair answer is? And this is why companies never say this out loud, even though they act this way and think this way. They never ever are on the record saying it's not the customer's data, it's our data. And the reason for that is not because they're out on a limb legally. They're fine legally. They're in great shape legally, but they sound monstrous when they say that. Because
optics are bad. It's a bad slogan saying, if we own your data, that's a bad market.
Right. Like no one would say that. There was one small community bank when all the open banking debates were happening where the CEO made the mistake of saying on the record, it's not the customer's data, it's my data. And it was such an interesting window into the world because it's like, that's how they all think. But he was the only one who was dumb enough to say it out loud.
The quiet part out loud, right?
Right. So the quiet part is that legally it's the company's data and they can do what they want with it, but they don't want us to think that way. They don't want us to feel that way. And the reason they don't want us to, Jeff, I think, is because if they were just blatant about it and said it's our data, we can do what we want with it, the next thing that's going to happen the next day is Congress is going to pass a law saying...
Exactly. I think that law changes quickly.
Oh, totally.
Now, here's the strange thing. This gap, legally theirs, morally yours, sat there quietly, more or less, for 50 years, half a century. Nobody stormed Congress over it. And the reason is almost funny. The data just was not worth enough to fight about. Your shadow doesn't have much cash value. But then AI showed up, hungry, and suddenly thinking and giving away for free became the most valuable raw material on Earth.
So what I would say is the first wave of AI build out has mostly happened without the price of data going up significantly, from what I've seen.
Because they were largely getting data for free, right?
Exactly, right. So it was like
media, through scraping, things in the comments.
We had put so much of collective human knowledge on the internet for free. Like even think about something like Reddit, right? Where it's like most AI chatbots sound like Reddit because that's really what they're trained on. And so like there's so much of that data that was just out there that for the foundational model they had to build out to get to the level of intelligence that we're at, they didn't need to go hunt down sources of data that they had to buy. Mm-hmm. So that was the first generation of that build out. However, we are now at what I would say is in the second generation of that build out. And what the AI labs have all realized, I think, is that hey, we can build a pretty generally intelligent foundation model based on the data that we have right now. The problem is, once we start to build agentic applications on top of those foundation models, those harnesses that we're building, they need to be tuned to the specific tasks that they're responsible for. And what I've noticed is that as you're doing that tuning to build these agentic solutions, each one of those has such highly specialized like knowledge.
Can you give an example, Alex? I
can give you a great example. Yeah. So one that's being built out right now is in my industry, what's called personal financial management, which is basically just like a budgeting app, right? Mm-hmm. So like a Monarch or a Mint.com or a YNAB, or there's a bunch of them out there. That in some senses can use just general model intelligence, right? Like, should I save more than I spend? Yes. Like there's some basic things that these AI models already know. But then like, okay, now we want to actually map out a really specific journey for a user on how they should save money, how they should balance these different financial goals they have. And you start to get pretty complex pretty quickly. And I think what the AI labs are realizing is if we want to build that product, and we want to make that a feature of the premium version of our AI chatbot, for example, which is actually what OpenAI is doing right now. They've already rolled out version 1 of this product. What they are finding is we can't do that just based on generic information. We have to get more specific financial information in order to give really good advice, and hopefully over time to be able to agentically take action on behalf of users to help them improve their finances. And so they are starting to look at sources of data that they haven't had access to before. And I think the question is going to be, do they choose to pay for that data and buy it? Or alternatively, do they try to get consumers to provide that data? So if you go back to ChatGPT as the example, they announced that their upcoming personal finance capabilities, which I think are available in ChatGPT Pro, and then eventually maybe we'll migrate down to the cheaper version and the free version, that now allows you to connect your bank account. So you can now connect your bank account in ChatGPT, feed in all of your financial data. The combination is what's going to be a really powerful application for consumers. And so I think as this agentic layer gets built out, we are going to see demand for very specific pots of data in order to really like tune the model and the agentic capabilities and get it to a high level of function. And when that happens, the question is going to be, do the AI labs try to like do what they've done before, which is like just find a way to get to it for free as quickly as they can? Are they going to strike partnerships with companies to like buy or access the data? Or are they going to go direct to the end customer and say, hey, you have access to this data because it's yours. Why don't you give us permission to it and we'll go access it on your behalf?
So something subtle just shifted here, something important. The AI labs, the most powerful companies of this era, might have to come and ask you for data. Now that flips the whole thing. For the first time, you are not the product being sold, you're the one with a say. Yes or no, what's in it for me? Now that's one possible cure for all of this. You get a voice and maybe a small cut by choosing to share your own data. Not retire on it money, nobody's promising that, but a seat at a table you're never allowed near. Full disclosure, Vana is of course my partner on this podcast, but there's a reason for that. I'm intrigued by what they're doing. And this, in many ways, is what Vana is all about, helping users have agency and sovereignty over their data. James saw a version of this up close.
Vana is doing it in a different way. So like the really cool thing here is like on the Vana platform, let's just say I'm a user, I can reach out to other users and we can just create our own data set that we think is cool and go sell it ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like I've never heard of anybody doing that before. That is really, really cool. If it's something that's interesting, they say, hey, James, like, yeah, you can go sell it too. They're going to get money for it. Like just very, very interesting stuff that it's just really changing the whole what's possible.
That's one possible cure. The data is yours, let you sell it. But it's not the only way to think about this. There's a serious school of thought that says the real fix is not necessarily individual property, it's more of a collective, a commons. And its leading voice also carries a warning that complicates the whole sunny story. That's Stefan Verhulst, who studies how data gets governed and co-founded a research lab called the GovLab. Now, he has a kind of bold, provocative theory. There's a lot of people who are excited about this AI summer, but Stefan says actually something colder is setting in underneath it, and that is a data winter.
Ultimately, what we can see indeed is that we see this asymmetry between those that have data and those that don't have data. Mm-hmm. And that's the new, I would say, power asymmetry in today's world, which also means that the value of data or the data itself creates a competitive edge or an edge that in the past was never as pronounced as it currently is. As a result of extractive behavior, and I've written about that, we actually see the emergence of a data winter, right? So we have a summer.
Data winter, if one of your key phrases.
Well, it's because, anyway, everyone is now excited about the AI summer. And we've had a few AI summers before, and it turns into AI winters. But what we actually see is indeed an AI summer, but at the same time, a data winter, by which I mean we see actually a decline of accessibility of the data. And so the supply and the opportunity to access that supply has decreased because of fear and because of a attempt to prevent extraction of happening. Certain frontier models would not exist without Wikipedia having been accessible and available for all. But Wikipedia has suffered as a result because, anyway, why would you go to Wikipedia if you can get it on a generative AI conversational chatbot way?
Yeah.
And that also means that less people are contributing to Wikipedia. What I've been working on is this concept of a data commons, which basically allows data holders and data and even anyway creators to basically connect and to a large extent pool data in a way that is accessible, but accessible in alignment with their preferences and expectations. And that includes also preferences and expectations with regard to attribution, because it's not just a challenge of did I get paid? It's also a challenge of is there actually attribution of my work, right? And so preferences and expectations with regard to attribution, preferences and expectations with regard to who has access to it and for what purpose, right? And then also preferences and expectations with regard to the revenue or the pricing that is attached to having access to the data. And so data commons, from my perspective, is the institutional solution to enforce a new licensing regime, which I've been calling a social license for actually having access to data. And that's especially important in context, for instance, of indigenous languages or languages that are now in high demand, where there is a real concern that this extractive behavior will actually undermine and marginalize them more than ever before. And so tomorrow, Jeff, we are launching a new incubator where we will launch an incubator for the creation of data commons for indigenous languages and for indigenous cultures, where they actually can pool the languages that from a particular community for instance, AI purposes, so that they are not marginalized, right? And actually have access to AI in their language, but in a way that they can provide access in a way that aligns with their preferences and expectations. And so that's what we are trying to do.
Can you connect the dots from how this data commons would impact data portability? That's one of the themes of this show, data portability.
Yeah. And again, I think data portability, so we have this asymmetry to a large extent between who has access and who does not have access, or how you have access. In addition to this asymmetry of access, we also have an asymmetry of agency, meaning, do I have agency to determine whether or not I share my data or port my data to other places to a large extent? And so from my perspective, data portability is fundamental to address also the agency asymmetry in today's data world, where you actually provide agency to the data holder or the data subject, for that matter, to actually be able to take their data and put it elsewhere in alignment with their preferences and expectations. And so, I think data portability is fundamental for this effort, but it also means that we actually have to make it really portable and fluid. Because what we've seen is like quite often data portability has been limited and has not been really fluid in the way that one would hope. And so I think it's fundamental.
So where does all this leave you, the person who generates the data in the first place? Now, here's the sort of frustrating part. In the US, there's no single federal law that protects it. What you get instead is a patchwork around 20 states with real privacy laws and the rest without, so your rights can depend on your zip code. California has gone the furthest, a Delete Act with a state-run tool that, as of this year, lets you ask every registered data broker to wipe you in one shot. But the most powerful thing you've got isn't written down at all. Here's Alex on what you can actually do.
I think the thing I would say is that thing we were talking about before about do you own your data or not, the law doesn't really matter. Everyone you come up against is going to say you, the customer, own your data, because that's the thing we all intuitively know is right. And what that means is you actually have a great deal of power that you might not be fully exercising or using because it is your data. And so I think the advice I would give is always go into any interaction with the assumption that you own your data, that you are the custodian of your data, and that if you see any interaction, any app that you download, anything where your data seems to be being misused, you have options in that scenario. You should document that. You probably have at least some legal right if it's financial data, because a lot of that is more heavily regulated. And even if you don't have a specific legal right to get the situation remedied, document it and reach out to your congressman, reach out to the FCC, reach out to these different agencies, reach out to the CFPB. They can help you resolve disputes, even if you don't technically have legal rights, because there's no one on earth that doesn't think that an individual's data ultimately belongs to them.
Anything else you want to say or share before we call it?
The only thing that I will flag is just that we know the AI labs are going to be incredibly hungry for financial data. So just watch for the overlap of the AI labs and financial data, because I think we're going to see many more interesting arrangements in the future where they try to get access to data that they don't have today.
And on that note, one wild coincidence, I swear I am not making up, I could not make up, literally minutes after I ended a call with Alex, I checked my email and there was an email from OpenAI about ChatGPT's new integration with financial data. I checked the timestamps on that email. Listener, I kid you not, it was the precise minutes Alex was predicting future integration of AI and financial data. That very minute, we got the email from OpenAI about ChatGPT's new integration with financial data. So it is happening. But let's go back to where we started, that dumpster, the company quietly weighing a restaurant's garbage and how to trade on that data. Now, when we started, that was just a silly story. By now, it should feel like something else. A glimpse of a market that runs on you, sees nearly everything, and mostly operates where you can't look. Now, we spent this episode inside of that market, where it comes from, who's buying, what you're actually worth, who owns the data, and how AI just poured gasoline on all of it. And a market this big has a way of opening up even bigger questions the closer you get. Like, the governments are now buying from data brokers the very information they otherwise need a warrant to collect. Or the strange one coming fast around the bend. When an AI generates new data about you, who owns that? But here's the thread under all of this, the one this whole season keeps returning to. The fight's never really about the price of your data. A few cents, a few bucks, that's kind of a distraction. The real question is what say you have, your agency. And the precondition for having any say of all of that is portability, the plain ability to take your data and move it. That's not a checkbox buried in a privacy policy. It's structural power over markets, over who gets to build on you, over who you get to become in this digital world. The dumpster is never the point, but the lid was, in a sense. And that will do it for this episode of The People's AI. Thank you to James Coyle, who can find a signal in literal garbage, to Alex Johnson, who makes a century of credit history feel like a thriller, and to Stefan Verhulst for the warning underneath the summer boom. The People's AI is presented by the Vana Foundation. Vana is supporting the creation of a new internet, one rooted in data sovereignty, user ownership, and data portability. Their mission is to create a decentralized data ecosystem where individuals, not corporations, govern their own data and share the value it creates. Learn more at vana.org. Thank you to Bradford Craig for our theme music, to Kate Morgan for research, and to Jasper Chua, our producer, for sound design, music, editing, and the videos you'll see on YouTube. And thank you to you, yes you, if you're a listener. If this is your first time with the show, please subscribe, share it, send to a friend. I'm Jeff Wilser. Thanks for listening.